Okay, now I'm going to turn it to members of the council. I just want to make sure we clear up any misunderstanding on the issues. The original motion was an emergency a policy to change the way we choose the providers of the invocation before this city council. It would invoke the emergency clause. As a result, the invocation that was scheduled by the city clerk's office to be given on February 17th would not be given under that policy. The substitute motion by Councilwoman Williams, the one that is on the floor now to be discussed, would also be implemented immediately and then result in us having a moment of silent prayer and reflection from this point forward, also meaning that the Satanic Temple would not provide an invocation before this city council on the 17th. Both of them, at least as it relates to that issue, arrive at the same conclusion. I don't mean to speak for our city attorney. I think our city manager has authorized for this purpose. Normally, we don't want our city attorney to give legal advice from the floor, but it's authorized the attorney to at least speak why the original proposal, the original motion, would put the city, if that one were to pass, would put the city in a position of likely being acting unconstitutionally, therefore in a losing position in a lawsuit, whereas the substitute motion by Councilman Williams would put us on much more solid legal footing, at least as it relates to constitutionality of our actions. So, Mr. City Manager, I'll turn it to you and see if it's okay. Ask you if our city attorney could at least provide brief comments, and I hope I have accurately described the legal dilemma.
Mayor, yes, given the significance of the item, it is appropriate for the city attorney to do what you said. I'll turn over to City Attorney Brad Holm.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to address this issue, very important issue to our community. In this case, Ms. Short followed the scheduling rules that were in place at the time that she booked the opportunity to give the prayer in city council meeting. So she followed the rules. These rules assured her of the right to pray on February 17 unless the council modified its practice of spoken prayer at council meetings. If the council adopted a moment of silent prayer and applied it immediately, that change in practice would not suppress a minority religious viewpoint while favoring more broadly held religious viewpoints. Council could also change the scheduling of spoken prayers prospectively, which is the first motion that was before the council. But the new procedure could not be applied retroactively because the new procedure, though not unconstitutional on its face, would be viewed as what's called an as-applied violation of the First Amendment. So where we are now is this. Mayor and council can decide that no one will offer spoken prayers going forward, but mayor and council cannot decide that this woman will not be allowed to offer her spoken prayer. Because if the mayor and council were to do that, we have already been told by representatives of the person who followed the rules and booked the prayer back in December for February 17th that they would file a lawsuit. And our view as the city attorney's office, and my view personally as the city attorney, is that we would be likely to lose that case.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Holm. I just want to make sure we got that clear. Obviously, the city council can ignore the advice of our legal counsel, but I want to make sure that people understood the legal framework under which we're making this very, very important decision. I'll now turn it to members of the city council for comments they may have on the motion. Mr. City Manager, I'm looking at your look on your face and wondering.
I'm just observing the look on the motion maker's face and wondering if there was a question we needed to answer.
Councilman Williams, I'll turn to you first.
Well, no, Brad was very difficult to hear, and I didn't quite understand or hear what you were saying about application and retroactive and how that applied. So could you repeat that for me, please?
You bet. Mayor, Councilwoman Williams. So the council could change the scheduling of spoken prayers prospectively, meaning in the future. We could change the way we schedule those, which is essentially what the original matter on the agenda contemplates. That's okay to do that. That's constitutional to change it. But what we couldn't do is apply it retroactively in this case to a person who had already booked the prayer back in December for February 17th. That would be an unconstitutional suppression of a minority religious viewpoint, which is in contravention of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution.
All right, Councilman Williams, to answer your question, Lisa, to the legal framework we're operating, essentially what he's saying is that if we move forward with even what the original motion was, but canceled the previously scheduled location of the 17th, it would put us in significant legal hot water. We'd be acting in an unconstitutional way, I think is what he is saying. Okay, Councilman Waring.
So I guess I'm surprised to hear Brad say that, given some of his comments in the paper. So we'll get that in a second. But several of the speakers, quite a few of the people on my Twitter and Facebook page and so forth, talked about the constitutionality of the plan in general. Take out February 17th and prospective versus doing away with their speaking on the 17th. There's nothing wrong with the system where the council members themselves select individuals to come for the prayer on a rotating basis. It's the way Congress does it. It's the way the state legislature does it. So anybody who says this is a violation of church and state, are they correct?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, the tradition of allowing individual elected officials to participate in the prayer selection is not unconstitutional on its face. The way a lawyer looks at constitutionality is that's only the first of two questions that are presented. So on its face, it's constitutional to go that route, not a problem. The question is, the second one, whether or not it's applied fairly so as not to suppress a minority religious viewpoint.
I understand, but I wasn't asking about that. I think the speakers were trying to claim the high ground on just the idea that we should be having a prayer at all. And they are wrong in that analysis.
Prayer is constitutional in this setting.
And we're a government body, so
yes.
By definition, then,
Congress,
you can have prayer at a government body.
Congress, state legislatures, and city councils may have prayer. That's correct.
And they do it now. There's nothing. They did it when I was in the state legislature. It sounds like Congress is doing it right now. We heard that the state legislature is doing it probably even as we speak, if they're in session. So that's too broadly stated. I didn't want people at home. I knew what your answer was going to be, but I didn't want people at home to be confused by that. It is also not outside the bounds. So these people who want to come speak on the 17th are from Tucson?
My understanding is that that's correct. That
and they self-identified in the paper. I assume they know where they live. So
the people that speak in the paper are wide and varied. The individual who is booked to pray is not the individual who's given the most interviews in the paper. The individual who's booked to pray is a woman by the name of Michelle Short. My understanding is she lives in Tucson, but I have not verified that.
There was a case in 2014 saying we don't have to have people from out of the city pray. Is that right? I mean, I am not a lawyer, so you can give as much legalese about that as you like, but is that kind of the long and short of it?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, you're correct. The case said that a city does not have to, in an effort to achieve religious balancing, does not have to go beyond its borders to find some other religion to add to its religious balancing. That's correct.
So for both the main points, really the only points of the motion that I made, both would be constitutional going forward.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, that's correct. If applied prospectively, meaning in the future, that would be correct.
Okay. I will just point out your comments in the Republic on Sunday. You're quoted rather extensively. It says, Holm, which is you, liken the councilman's proposal, which is me and the other three, to prayers in Congress where lawmakers can invite people from their district. Holm said the proposal wouldn't directly exclude the Satanic Temple. Here's your quote. I don't see that following the new procedure would necessarily give them a right to sue because she wouldn't be prohibited from giving a prayer. She would just have to follow the procedure, Holmes said, referring to Michelle Short. So we're speaking specifically about this case and the item on the 17th, I assume, because you're mentioning her by name, or at least that's what's mentioned here. A temple member expect to give the prayer. There's another paragraph I'll get to in a second. Why is that different than what you're saying here? Because it is different.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, in the context of the interview with the paper, I was talking about prospectively, meaning that the councilman's proposal and the rules, if applied prospectively, would not necessarily give her a right to sue.
But that's not the way it's written up here. I think we agree on that.
I haven't focused on, and I'm sorry, I don't have the language of the article in front of me, Councilman, but
provided, but.
And so I'm not familiar with exactly how it's quoted, but in context, the point that was made is the procedure is not unconstitutional on its face as long as it is applied prospectively and doesn't deprive this person who has a minority religious viewpoint of having followed the rules and been booked to pray on the 17th, then it wouldn't give her an opportunity to sue.
But I could see why people reading this article would be confused. It seemed like we were on firm legal footing. My staff sat with you and wrote this up and talked about the emergency clause for a great chunk of Friday afternoon. So here we are, and we're getting slightly different advice than we had before. It continues, but the debate could be moot if Short doesn't live in Phoenix. Again, we're referring to her, and she's the one coming on the 17th. Holmes said the city doesn't have to let non-residents give the prayer, referring to a 2014 Supreme Court ruling. I'm not making all this stuff up. DeHaan, who I believe is the attorney or one of the other Satanists from Tucson, I guess, and he's the one I think you referenced as giving more interviews and so forth, told the Republic that he and Short live in Tucson, and Short's Facebook page states that she lives in Tucson. Holmes said the city has received conflicting information about where Short lives. But again, it seems to imply that if she doesn't live in Phoenix, we could have excluded her. I think I can speak, there's at least one lawyer who might disagree with your analysis that we can't use the 2014 case to ban it from February 17th. But you're saying now you're sure that we can't use it now that we know that she's not a Phoenix resident?
Mayor, Councilman
I don't think Mr. Holm can say anything for sure, but he's given us the best advice he can, and I think for this instance, it's okay for the community to hear it. But yeah, please, Mr. Holm.
Okay, before he answers that, then I guess I'll say I'm surprised that I guess we are assuming that my motion won't pass because we are now apparently giving away our case if it should pass and we implement the program. This is surprising and not typical behavior of the city. This is why we have executive session in the first place, is not to give away our legal strategies. But now that we have, I figure I might as well just forge ahead. So I'm curious as to his interpretation of this case.
Yeah, and first of all, I make sure, at least in my analysis, that there's no novel legal theories. This is constitutional interpretation of constitutional law. So if we end up getting sued, this would not put us at any legal disadvantage. This is not how we're positioning the case. These are the straight constitutional arguments that he is providing. There's nothing novel about them. Mr. Holmes?
I would say what's obvious and novel to you might not be to another lawyer or judge. So I guess I would have preferred to have them sort this out. But we've already given away the store, I guess. So Brad, why don't you respond?
With all that back and forth, I apologize, Mayor and Councilman Waring. Now, I'm
You need
not
me to
exactly
rephrase?
sure of the question.
Okay, so the
residents-
question is, I have heard from at least one lawyer who believes the 2014 Supreme Court case does say that we could say, oh, we found out, again, loosely translated, you don't live in Phoenix. She says she doesn't live in Phoenix. Facebook says she doesn't live in Phoenix. We could say, oh, you know what, sorry, we shouldn't have scheduled you, so what do you say to that?
The key here is the rules of engagement that were in place when she booked the opportunity to pray. If the Department of Motor Vehicles, for example, were all of a sudden to change the glass correction requirement for driver's licenses, and people who had previously qualified now don't qualify under the new rule, the Department of Motor Vehicles can't revoke those licenses of the people who qualified previously. When they come up for renewal, perhaps they can then impose the new rule, and that's the key here, is that we're imposing or potentially imposing a new rule. You can't impose a new rule retroactively under these circumstances. That's basic, fundamental First Amendment and constitutional law.
Fair enough. Again, it seems to contradict what was written here in the newspaper. I suggested yesterday, I thought very reasonably, hey, I read it a certain way. I think a lot of other people did as well. Perhaps we should send out or contact the reporter and explain further what was meant. I was told at the time, oh, we can't do that, executive session and so forth. Now here we are. We've discussed all the issues that would have come up in that conversation. In a form that's broadcast on TV, people in Kabul could be listening to this right now on the internet. So I am a little surprised that what I thought was a reasonable request to clarify with the reporter, and by definition the public who might read this article, I thought that was a reasonable request that I guess was shunted aside, and now I guess we're explaining it sort of after the fact. I will say this about, I have a little bit of axe to grind about this. This is a case for 2014. We went ahead and didn't change our policies. Apparently nobody notified the city clerk's office. You are not city attorney, so it's not a criticism of you. I am surprised we have a pretty big legal department. We have a big lobbying team that is supposed to be keeping track of what's going on in Washington and so forth. I have complained about this before vociferously. We have this big team, and stuff like this and the FAA and numerous other issues just seem to slip through the cracks. So nobody told the city clerk's office, it sounds like, that there was this case where we could reject people who were applying from outside of Phoenix. And what happened then is a Satanist applied, and apparently nobody in the city clerk's office thought, I wonder if the council people would like to know that. I think that might be something they'd want to know, that a Satanist is coming, just for information purposes only. So we found out about it, and now here we are, we chewed up, 3 hours or something. People have suggested on my Facebook page, et cetera, because we didn't have a whole lot of dialogue with actual Satanists today, that this is a waste of time, why am I wasting the time, and so forth. Well, this wasn't my idea. But certainly there are citizens out there, whether some of these folks respect their opinion or not, who feel very strongly about this issue, as do I, but take me out of this. I thought having a debate was healthy, so I made, with you in full, you worked on it on Friday, so I thought we were on the same page. We put this out on Friday, and we're having a discussion. I think it's healthy that we are. However, it would probably be more productive to be discussing pensions and so forth. So if city staff had been a little more cognizant of the current rules, we wouldn't be in this situation at all. We would have had new rules, which would have allowed us to say no to the Satanist, doesn't live in the city, council people pick the people who give the prayer, and we wouldn't be in this situation. It would all be constitutional. So I don't think it's unreasonable for me to have my back up a little bit about how this has gone. Going forward, I hope, again, we can do better, because I don't think what I'm asking is unreasonable, given the enormous amount of money we spend on the two departments I just mentioned. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Comments, any other comments or
Mayor?
questions as it relates to the motion that's on the table? Councilman Nowakowski, please.
So, Mayor, I have the Supreme Court decision back in May 5th of 2014, and to me, I think it regulates that we can't regulate the content of the prayer, but we could regulate the person giving the prayer. Is that right or wrong, to your opinion?
Oh, Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, it's absolutely right that we cannot regulate the content of prayer. We also cannot regulate who gives the prayer, other than we don't have to seek out non-residents. And again, the issue here is the rules of engagement that were in place in December when this person booked the prayer, as opposed to the rules we're contemplating today in the current motions.
Another question is, after the 17th, for the city clerk, how many other individuals are already booked or scheduled to do prayers? I mean, is this the only person scheduled for prayer, or is there others?
This is the last one. We have not scheduled any for a couple of weeks. The
Well, I
February
heard that
17th is the last meeting anyone is scheduled.
So I heard from staff that we have it up to, all the way through the month of March, so I'm confused. I'm getting mixed messages that this isn't the only person that's scheduled, that we have people scheduled all the way through March. That's what we were told today. So I'm not sure who's not telling the truth here, but it's not just one person going to get affected by this decision. There's going to be several individuals, right? So can I have some clarification on that?
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski.
First off, I want to the best of our ability, ask staff if they know whether or not other people have applied, at least to provide the invocation for this council, whether they've been scheduled or not. Sounds like they haven't been scheduled, but there may be people in the queue, if you will. But
Well, Mayor, I'm confused because when was this one actually scheduled?
do we know when?
I was told back in December. That was more than a month out, right? So if our practice is to schedule, if we schedule this individual a month out, we wouldn't have scheduled other ones a month out? Something's not right. It doesn't smell right, doesn't look right. Something's wrong here.
Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, this is the February 17th is the last one that is scheduled. When the council began having discussions and had an executive session about changing the rules, we stopped scheduling any further invocations until the issues were resolved and the policy was set.
All right, additional questions? Councilman DeCiccio, do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, Mayor, it's going to be more of a comment. What you're hearing here today is a rigging of a presentation. You have a city attorney that literally came out with a presentation earlier. Now he's rigged it to be able to get this presentation the way he did today. That's what's occurring. So let me be a little bit more direct. I'm going to, basically get a little bit more excitement out of this thing, because what's happening here is you're seeing a long-term tradition literally being changed overnight. Did any of you hear it, other than through me, that there might be a potential that they're going to be banning prayer? No. It was all done because all these things get done behind closed doors at the City of Phoenix. So let me tell you what Plan B is. Pastor Gonzalez, está aquí, see? Okay. Pastor Gonzalez called me today. He goes, "What's Plan B, Sal?" Because I knew this rigging was going to occur here. This is what happens at the City of Phoenix. The Sheraton was rigged. The water rate increase was rigged. This is rigged. So what I've done is I've worked with other council members here. This is not going to end tonight. If we fail and prayer goes away at the City of Phoenix, they ban prayer at the City of Phoenix. Some of us have already prepared a letter here. This is Plan B that will literally take this a vote to the public. We're going to ask for a special meeting of the council to vote to take this to the public, because you know what? I've heard from this many people, just from my office alone. Now, these are small pieces of paper who want to keep prayer at the City of Phoenix. This city is rigging things, and we have an opportunity to take the city back in our own hands tonight. And we're going to start doing that, because I'll tell you what, I'm done with this kind of attitude that I've heard here. You have a city attorney literally changing the rules, changing the presentation, and rigging the presentation tonight in order to accommodate whatever agenda that they want to give here at city staff. So let me cover just a couple things, what Plan B is going to be at the City of Phoenix. I was going to give a different type of presentation, but I'm going to give you this one instead, because I want to give you hope. I want you to walk out of here knowing that this is not going to stop tonight if we lose this vote. What's going to happen is this. I'm going to ask for a special election. Some of us have already signed off on a letter. It's done with an attorney. If this doesn't work, then we're going to go to the streets looking to take an initiative. I already talked to some of the churches. They want to go out there, get their groups together. Then this will be on the ballot at the next city council election when everybody else has to vote on this thing. That is what's going to happen. And I'm telling you, there are going to be thousands. I already had one person who's connected with all the churches saying he can get over 26,000 signatures himself because of all the churches he's connected to. Members of the LDS community, members of the Catholic community, and members of the Protestant community that he's connected to. So we're going to take this after this, because of what's occurring here. I can already see what's happening. We're going to take this, and you're going to have an opportunity to decide whether or not the City of Phoenix bans prayer or allows prayer to occur here at the City of Phoenix. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to turn over to members of the council. If you have any
It was Councilman Nowakowski, Jim Waring, and myself.
questions or comments about the substitute motion. Councilman Waring, you've asked a lot, but you got another one. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So you said you stopped taking the applications. Is that right? Or you just didn't get any more, or?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, I'm not sure now whether we've had any others. We have not scheduled anybody else. We stopped the scheduling of anyone pending what the new rules would be, so we wouldn't have this situation.
I was unaware of that, so I guess that's okay, because you're not taking any more applications. Is that correct?
We are not scheduling anyone, correct.
All right. I guess I didn't expect necessarily that we'd be talking about banning the prayer. It's been going on for 65 years in the city of Phoenix, since I think they said 1951, and that is disappointed to, I think, me and a lot of us. I did speak up and say, I don't think, at first I was just going to walk out to the satanic prayer. I'm a big believer in just not giving people attention who clearly are trying to get attention, and change your behavior. Change theirs, ignore until they go away. However, I did decide Friday afternoon, we're going to fight this out as much as possible. So this is probably the last step in the line. I do want to say I'm not necessarily, I'm disappointed in the city performance on some of this, but I am chalking it up to not being as laser focused as maybe it could be, rather than anybody trying to pull a fast one over me. I don't think anybody in this body is a Satanist. I don't think anybody on this staff is a Satanist. I don't think anybody was thinking 2 months ago, hey, let's try to set it up so we can get rid of the prayer. I don't think that was a thought in anybody's mind. That's just my interpretation. I think it was another city screw-up, and now the response has been mishandled, and the Satanists win. That's not acceptable to me. So you can shout out, or you can get elected to the city council, and you can make your own comments up here. That's probably not likely to happen, though, is my guess. So I guess I would say this. I feel like we did everything we could in good faith to get a constitutional motion today, working with the city attorney and so forth. And now I'm hearing the very motion that we crafted with them. I don't know how it could have been understood that we wanted to go into effect immediately, talked about the emergency clause, but would have taken effect tomorrow. Now, since we talked a lot about the executive session, it's my understanding we never wrote down in our rules or in law that we're going to do a prayer. So we could change the practice, which is exactly what my motion said. I was unaware of this on Friday. It's another thing that seems to have slipped through the cracks. I'm not the lawyer. I'm asking for advice. So I always want full and practical advice. And in this case, we don't need an emergency clause, correct? If the substitute motion failed and the motion I put forth passed, it would go in effect tomorrow, even if it was a 5-4 rather than a 7-2 vote. Is that accurate?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, I don't think that's accurate because your motion is to enact an ordinance, and an ordinance.
It's a practice. It says practice. I got the draft right here.
For the third time
in
he
your
said
office
this.
on this today too. I mean, what am I supposed to think here? Well, that's frustrating because
Well, you have a
we
city
worked
attorney
this
that
out
doesn't know what he's doing again.
specifically. We worked this out specifically so that this motion would need 5 votes and would go in effect. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Perhaps there's a misinterpretation, but there were several of us who worked on it, so I'm not sure why there's not any clarity here. I guess I know how this is going to go, so maybe I'll just stop now. But it is extremely frustrating. I speak about this stuff, it seems like every meeting between the FAA and the checks in the dumpster and everything else. It's just unacceptable. You know, Matthew Whitaker was a nominee for a position down here. Allegations of plagiarism. We hear that there's more. And we've been told, no, 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 it's not like that. That's not the way it is. And it turned out it was exactly the way it is. I cannot believe I'm having this conversation again. It's like Groundhog Day for me, which I will just stop there by saying that's an excellent movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it. Bill Murray, very funny. But beyond that, I just, before I say something intemperate, I guess I'll just be quiet. Thank you.
At least in my opinion,
Mayor.
the core issue is if this council decides to continue to allow invocation, but we do so in a way that stops the applicant who was scheduled to go on the 17th, we are in significant constitutional peril. If this council decides to support the substitute motion, and then there is a vote later on, and the invocation comes back before this city council, it will always have to be done meeting the constitutional requirements. Means we can't do so in a way that discriminates against minority faith. If we do so, then we'll put ourselves in constitutional peril in a situation where we will inevitably lose before the court. So that doesn't change. The constitutional framework in which we're making this decision doesn't change regardless of whether we do that or not. And just we all need to move forward with eyes wide open as it relates to that. Are there other comments by members of this?
Mayor, I
I want
just
to
to
respond
follow,
to that.
Councilman
follow up.
Nowakowski, yes, please, go ahead.
Mayor, I'm reading this, and I'm not an attorney, but this decision right here, it talks about how the consul back in the town of Greece in New York City, that they actually had one Protestant minister saying the prayer for every single council meeting, and that they didn't have the right to monitor his content, but they had the right to choose one minister for every single council meeting. So I'm not sure where I'm getting this advice from our legal counsel saying that we cannot choose ministers or individuals that are active in our community, that give back to our community, that serve the homeless and children's, and that they can't, that we can't choose those individuals. If, according to the Supreme Court, it states that, I'm getting mixed messages. The other thing is that they said that if we would put practice and take out the emergency clause, that we wouldn't have a problem with a three-quarter vote, that it would just take 5 individuals from this council to not end prayer in the city of Phoenix.
You heard it too. It wasn't just me.
Our city attorney has given us the advice. Obviously, every council member can accept or reject that advice, as that's their choice as elected officials. But the request is that the city attorney give the best advice that he can under the circumstances. Councilman Waring.
I guess just I have issues with the Satanists, and them speaking. I don't think that's the message we want to send on behalf of the city of Phoenix, but take that out of it. I just felt like we made an extremely good faith effort to try to get this right. Wouldn't have proceeded if I thought in some way I was aware of all the issues that you're talking about were possible, but this is why we asked for legal advice and why we thought this had been fully vetted. I read the comments in the paper that had seemed to completely support that. So I was, I guess, blissfully unaware that this legal ground was going to change. I would also say our legal advisor is not the only he is not the only font of information on this. He is not the ultimate decider. He would not be the judge in our case. Now, we have already again, on the false premise that my thing is somehow going to pass, I recognize that it sounds like it's not. But if it did, we've already given away the case. I don't know why we did it quite this way, but okay. But I have an issue that goes beyond just this particular item. I have an issue with the way this is handled, and I think my frustration is probably bleeding through in my comments, and I think rightfully so. And I think there are a lot of people that are counting on the city getting it right out there, who are watching at home or here in the audience, and it's just very frustrating. I feel like the city let them down again, and this affects more people than us resealing the cracks that had already been sealed a couple months ago. But if you start adding up these things over and over again, it's hard to have a lot of confidence in what I'm hearing. I've talked about this at these meetings before. It's very, very frustrating.
All right, excellent. I'll turn to any other members of the council. Councilman Gallego, do you have a short statement to make in advance of a vote? We'll see if the substitute motion passes. Councilman Gallego.
Wonderful. Thank you to everyone who has been involved with this process. We appreciate your dedication to a stronger city, including those of you who don't live in Phoenix but believe the decision we're making is important to a broader group of people. We really appreciate your interest. These are important issues. They are not easy. Councilman Waring has been working very hard to find a solution, and many others of us have been looking for solutions. I've spoken to several constitutional attorneys about what our options were, and what they told me is that one of the mistakes we made was a mistake by elected officials. That once an elected official said that his intent was to prevent a group from having the right to pray, that dramatically changed our legal case. That set up a decision where we would either have to give wheelbarrows of cash to the Satanic Temple, or we would have to make a change. And that we dramatically hurt our legal case by saying that our intention was to deny one group the right to pray. So we as elected officials have to take responsibility for our words, which weaken our legal case and put taxpayer money at risk. We are stewards of taxpayer money, and we need to be responsible as well.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to say that I'll be supporting the substitute motion, and I want to say, this is the way this issue has been handled, not by the public, because I respect every single person in the public. Many who have spoke very passionately about their own faith, their own belief in the good Lord, and how that they feel it affects their recommendation as council. I respect every member of this city council. I respect their own personal faith, their own personal belief systems, and I know that is important to them as they serve on this body and as they make important decisions affecting the people of the city of Phoenix. And I approach this issue as I do all issues before this body, as a person of faith. I don't personally talk about it a lot. I don't broadcast it a lot. But I'm a Christian. I'm Catholic. I was raised in a household by parents who lived their faith in both words and deeds. And my faith has brought me peace during troubled times and gratitude during good times. Just a few weeks ago, I put my hand on the Bible during my inauguration. And at the same time, I raised my right hand and swore to uphold the United States Constitution. Not even 2 years ago, the justices on the Supreme Court, including conservative justices Roberts and Alito, stated clearly what the Constitution demands of cities like ours, that when it comes to prayer, we can't discriminate against minority or unpopular faith. To discriminate against faith would violate the oath that all of us on this dais took. And I personally take that very, very seriously. My faith gives me strength. Personally, thanks to my faith, I'm certainly strong enough to withstand a 2-minute invocation from a group whose agenda or message doesn't reflect my own faith. You know, this council didn't ask for this controversy. Nobody on this council, quote, pushed, unquote, it, as one of my colleagues has repeatedly and incorrectly asserted. This issue was brought to us. I understand the sensitivity of this issue. I get it. I know that this is deeply personal for so many people, not only in this room, but throughout the city of Phoenix. And I respect those who have been respectful during this debate and have acted like adults. But we've also seen some pretty vicious and unfair political attacks over the last week. Really, really unfair and unfortunate attacks by members of this own body. Now, my faith teaches me to turn the other cheek. But I am deeply, deeply disappointed that one member of this council has sought to demagogue his colleagues on this city council. I find it very sad that a member of this council is so small and desperate to score political points that he openly questions the faith of his colleagues by repeatedly suggesting that members of this body were pushing, unquote, satanic prayer. Frankly, it's the most despicable thing that I have ever witnessed in my service to the city. This has gone over the line. So now, the original motion was asking the council to knowingly betray our oath of office. And it would no doubt open the city to litigation that we would inevitably lose and have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, to the litigants on the other side. I don't think that is what leadership calls us to do under these circumstances. The First Amendment to the Constitution is not ambiguous on this issue. So given the facts of this case, the very difficult facts of this case, I think the right course of action is what the motion made by Councilwoman Mathilda Williams, and I will be supporting the substitute motion. I'll now turn it over to members of the council. If any comments, I am actually going to be phoning in for the remainder of the meeting because I coach my son's basketball team, and the game starts soon, so I'll be listening in and doing the vote via phone, and I don't want to be late for that game. I owe it to my son. Councilman Waring.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't question anybody's motives and how you're voting on this, so or your face or anything else, as I think I said clearly before. But I will say I'm going to be voting against the motion because I just cannot bring myself to. Ironically, it will produce the effect. I guess I'm confused. So it produces the effect of the Satanists will not be speaking at the February 17th meeting. Supposedly that's a huge issue, us doing that. So, but apparently that's okay. I still haven't totally reconciled why that's the case. I think that's been lost. I again asked at the beginning of this procedure or this hearing that be announced. Apparently it wasn't because reporters have been asking me what is the effect of this and have been surprised at the result. But I'm correct, right? They will not be speaking on the 17th if the current motion, not mine, the other motion on the floor is passed.
Vice Mayor, Councilman Waring, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm correct in that. I do think probably a lot of people left not realizing that. So that's, I guess for my nefarious purposes, that's good. But I don't want to be the party to doing away with the prayer. But I understand it's a tough vote for a lot of people. It's frankly not a particularly tough one for me. But I understand, a lot of people, big room and so forth. Been there many times myself on the opposite side, so I understand. I will take one take exception to a little bit of what the mayor said, just one sentence about the knowingly. Certainly, I am not knowingly trying to violate the Constitution. I mentioned every good faith effort to speak with our attorneys and craft something that met constitutional muster. I'm surprised to hear now that it doesn't. Something got lost in translation again. I thought we had worked it, and I thought we were good. But apparently it wasn't. But I thought I did my best to make sure that we were okay. It wasn't until I talked to Ed Zerker about this on, I think it was Monday, before I did an interview with ABC, that there were even any hints that there was a problem. I had reading the paper and having had the back and forth on this, I had no reason to believe there would be. So that was news to me. So we didn't have our executive session until yesterday. So I will just say that I did not knowingly try to do anything other than represent the views of not every, but my constituents as I see fit, and we have elections to sort that out in the future. So that's it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, Mr. Waring, I think we want to clarify a question that Mr. Waring asked previously about the motion that we've seen. So I think the city attorney will clarify that the motion, which was different from the ordinance title that was read.
Yes.
You asked the
Well,
question as
Dan
to
Brown
whether.
worked on this
Yeah,
in the city attorney's
you asked the
office.
question as to whether your motion, or whoever motion was made, needed an emergency clause. Mr. Holm?
And Vice Mayor, Councilman Waring, I apologize. I thought that the original motion was the matter that was noticed on the agenda, which was called for the adoption of an ordinance. In point of fact, now that I look at your motion as drafted, it was to change the practice and not to amend the city council rules, which would require an ordinance amendment to the code. And so I understand now where you were going, and I apologize.
So
I
we did need
misunderstood.
5 votes. It's all right. It's just we did work with someone in your office who was available. And again, I think this is more communication. I am not saying in any way anybody was trying to screw this deal up and so forth. I got to feel like I'm getting the level best advice and so forth. And I can't say resent, but I do think saying I'm knowingly doing something is false under the circumstances. I made every possible. We spent hours on this thing. My staff spent hours, other staffers. Councilman Nowakowski was like, I thought it was 5 votes too. I think Councilman DeZizo was not in it. We all thought it was, how could we all be that wrong? So it sounds like there was some confusion. I would have thought Dan would have mentioned it to you, Dan, again, from your office. But apparently that didn't happen. Going forward, hopefully we'll do better.
Thank you. Councilwoman Williams, Pastor, I'm sorry.
The motion, is it an ordinance or is it a practice?
Which motion are you speaking
The first one.
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, I thought it was the ordinance, but as I see it in writing now from Councilman Waring, it's to change the practice. So it's
So-
not an ordinance.
Okay, so in changing the practice, will the February 17th still be in effect? Will they still be able to pray?
Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, if you change the practice and make it retroactive and cancel the prayer, we will get sued. If you change the practice and make it prospective and allowed her to pray on the 17th,
Okay.
we won't get sued, and then the new practice would be in effect
Got
for
it.
future schedules.
Okay, I needed.
All right,
Mayor?
Councilman DeCiccio.
I need to respond back to that because what you heard was a lot of nice words, but the actions don't follow the words, follow the actions. Think about this. You have a city attorney who literally has been changing his opinion as he's been sitting up here to be able to accommodate whatever it is, the position that he's trying to push here, which is to ban the prayer. When was the first time you heard about the prayer ban? When? This was the first time it was ever presented. It was done behind closed doors. I'm telling you, that's how these things work here at the City of Phoenix. People up here can get upset, they can complain, they can do all those things, but the bottom line is that is the MO of the City of Phoenix. You have a city attorney who rigged the presentation today. You have a motion that was put out that nobody had the opportunity really to debate until you came over here. Didn't hear it out there, did you? And you have a major change that's occurring here at the city of Phoenix. Major change. This is a significant change here of tradition that's been going on at the city of Phoenix haphazardly, like, oh, well, I guess we're just going to have to do this. There are other things that could have been done. We had to sit down and let the city attorney have different ideas. I'll give you I asked him about a chaplain. I said, well, what if we had a chaplain from the fire department or police department? He goes, well, if you bring in a Phoenix one from the police department, a chaplain in there, you will have this problem because they didn't go through a process. Well, then tell me the process. That's what an attorney is supposed to do. They're supposed to give you the idea. But what happened from day one is this city attorney has literally been setting this in place. They created the problem. They created
Vice Mayor,
the problem here.
I just have to say, as
Well,
city manager,
Ed, I'm not done talking. I'm sorry, Ed.
the city
I'm not
attorney
done
did not
talking.
rig
And when I'm
this.
done talking, you can interrupt me. You're not allowed to interrupt. Okay? So the bottom line is you have to be polite too, Ed. Because the bottom line, you and I had this
Councilman, we should all
conversation
be
this morning
polite. We
today.
should all be polite.
No,
up here.
you and I had this conversation today about the city attorney and how bad he is and what he is doing to this city. He's literally creating a situation here where we're having a problem. You and I had that conversation this morning. And I asked you, I said, try to make it more fair so that those of us that
Vice
are in the
Mayor.
minority here have an opportunity to
Personal,
have
and I
fairness
think it
when
need
it
to be
comes to
called
legal.
out of order.
So the bottom line is this, is that this is what you're starting to see here at the city of Phoenix. You're starting to see the problems come up. It's not just this, it's other things too. The Sheraton, the water rate increase that you were lied to, the fact that the city of Phoenix told the public publicly, and this is what Councilman Waring was talking about, told them that we didn't know anything that was going on with these flight changes, major changes that had a major impact for a lot of people's homes, like thousands of homes, right? Well, it turns out city staff said, well, we sort of know, well, we did know about it. We were sitting in the room. This is the kind of stuff that's going on. So the only way to fix this is for literally the public to start taking this into your own hands. We're going to take this forward. We're going to get this thing scheduled. If they don't do that, the politicians here at the city decide not to do this, then we've already got the commitment from the religious community to move this prayer forward, because it's even the secular individuals want to see this. I can't even tell you people that have come up to me and said, Sal, we think this is a good idea. Why would you want to take the prayer away? That's what you're having today. It's a ban on prayer. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Gates, are you still with us on the phone?
Yes, I am.
Would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you, Vice Mayor. I appreciate everybody's time that they have taken today to speak from the heart on this issue, and I would agree with some of the comments that have been made earlier here. I don't believe anyone on this council is trying to push a Satanist prayer. I believe that everyone is trying to do their level best to follow the law, person by person. I personally disagree. I have respect for Mr. Holm. You know, I personally take a little different view of the legal issues here, and so that's why I'll be voting no on this substitute motion.
Thank you, Councilman Gates. Councilwoman Pastor?
As you can tell, this has obviously been very emotional for all of us. And when my colleagues attack us and my faith, that's very personal. For me, Catholic girl understands and gets it. But when people tell me and I hear that I'm selling my soul, that's wrong, because I'm not selling my soul. Because today, God is standing with me, and He has been with me throughout my life. And He has me in this leadership role to make a decision. And doing that, we have gotten advice And we have gone round and round about what's best for our city. And people need to understand that. People need to understand the whole picture of how we got here and how this has been going round and round for many different reasons. I do believe that my colleagues on Friday were trying to come to a solution. It was in good faith to get there and had good intentions. But legally, what I am hearing is that on February 17th, she will be allowed to pray. And that's what I understand. And so that is one of the dynamics that we have to understand. And I have heard from all of you to not allow her to pray. And then I've heard from all of you to allow her to pray. I am going to make the best decision that I need to make for this city. And God will be with me, and He will be walking with me on this journey.
Thank you, Councilwoman. This is Councilwoman Delta Williams.
Vice Mayor, I have a comment.
Councilman Nowakowski.
And, you know, I hear Councilmember Pastor, and I agree with you. I'm confused because I'm hearing advice from our city attorney telling us one thing, and then we're getting Supreme Court decisions saying totally opposite. Right now, we were told that the first motion on the table would take a 3/4 vote, and it won't take a 3/4 vote. It takes 5 votes. The other thing we heard is also that it wouldn't stop the prayer from the 17th on, which it will, because we're changing the procedure. So that's where the confusion is. We're getting bad advice. So what my primary concern with all this is that we're voting on a moment of silence, and this, what's on the table right now. And what this is going to happen is that there's no other compromise. That's it. We're ending prayer. And to me, that's wrong. I don't think we should share any. I want to make sure that we respect everybody's rights. I want to make sure that we are getting legal advice from decisions from the Supreme Court so that we can make the right decisions here and that we don't put each other fighting against each other here. And what I'm hearing from people is that we shouldn't allow somebody from the outside, somebody from Tucson, to create all this chaos within the city of Phoenix. What I heard from individuals here is that we should have individuals praying for the city of Phoenix that serves the city of Phoenix, that helps the city of Phoenix, that provides services to the city of Phoenix, and that we as council members that were elected to represent our districts, that we should choose individuals that serve our community, that are servant leaders, that do good. And when I hear testimonies of hate groups, and I didn't know about all this, and this concerns me, that we will allow a hate group to come in here that talks against gays, Jews, and women, a hate group that talks about that they don't care what happened in 9/11, that created a book about rape. How can we allow an individual to do a prayer over the city of Phoenix and guide us with all this hatred? I don't think it's about canceling the meeting. It's about us having a procedure. It's about us doing the right decision. It's about us not allowing people from the outside with a hidden agenda to end prayer, to come in here and push their political views in prayer. So what I'm asking my colleagues to do is that, according to what the Supreme Court says here, we are allowed, as elected officials, to choose individuals from our city, from our residents from our city, that serves our city and does good to our city, to do these prayers over our city. And that's what I'm asking my colleagues, is not to end prayer, because a moment of silence will end prayer. A moment of silence will stop prayer, and the generations to come will be affected from it. So.
All right, Councilwoman Williams.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
I'm not finished yet, Vice Mayor. I support the First Amendment and the freedom of speech of individuals. I believe that we have an opportunity for individuals to have comments at the beginning of the meeting and at the end of our meeting. I believe that when we ask for prayer, we're asking for a higher being to come in here and to guide us and to help us make these hard decisions that we have to do. And it's not a political agenda during that prayer. It's asking for advice and guidance. And I believe that that's what we're asking for here, folks. And this moment of silence won't provide that. I had the opportunity to go to a school, and at the schools, before class starts, they have this about 15-second of silence, a moment of silence. I asked the children before I gave my speech, what's a moment of silence to you? Oh, it's a way for us to calm down before school starts. So they lost the whole focus. Children don't really understand what a moment of silence is. And I'm afraid that in the future, before every council meeting, that will happen. So my other concern is that would this ban prayer from all of our city facilities? I'm asking our attorney here, would that in the near future?
I believe that the question is, if the motion on the table, if it passes, will it ban prayer in city facilities?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, prayer on public facilities is governed by other rules, not rules that relate to prayers in public meetings sponsored by the public body, such as the City Council. And so all those rules stay in place. There are times when our facilities are actually rented out to churches to conduct their own meetings, and so of course prayer occurs there. There are times when there's an employee organization of Employees for Christ who they don't meet on our facilities, but when they're involved in their own activities, they also pray, and so all of those prayers could continue. We're just talking about the practice before the City Council.
Thank you.
Another question is, when we have our own meetings out in the community or within our own facilities, would we still be able to start our meetings or lead our meetings with a prayer?
Vice Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, what was the context again? I'm sorry.
Well, basically, if this motion passes, a moment of silence, can we actually have prayer at our district meetings, our block watch meetings that are actually in our city facilities? Or once a month, I actually gather 50 to 80 pastors within my district to actually come down to the city of Phoenix and to pray for my colleagues and the city of Phoenix and all of our employees. Would that ban that in the near future?
But Vice Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, the two motions only apply to this meeting and only the practice of this meeting and this meeting only.
All right.
Thank you. Councilwoman Williams?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I am also very upset with our councilman. The other end, I really, really work hard to do the very best I can at this job. I've always felt like God puts you where you need to be to do this. And somehow I have no idea. I never dreamed I'd be in politics, and I ended up here. And I try to do what I think is best for the neighborhood, for the city, for everybody here, and for all the employees. I truly, truly resent hearing what I have put a lot of effort in is rigging something when that's not true. I have always been very open. If you get my newsletter, you will see all the information that comes across my desk. But I will tell you on this issue, I was in exactly the same meeting as Councilman DeCiccio, and the other members heard exactly the same thing, had the same discussion, didn't hear anything else till I read Saturday's paper. Did not know what was totally proposed until we come back this week and heard. And I haven't had any secret meetings. I have been very concerned because since all this started, I've not only had emails, phone calls, pass it and I'll kill you. Oh, by the way, did you know that you have a satanic group in your district? Oh, did you hear about the one with spaghetti that actually wears a metal strainer? I hear they want to come. I want to protect the city. I want to do the right thing. I believe that if we don't change what we're doing, we will get sued, and I don't think that the city needs to spend $500,000 when we need to increase so many other things in the city. We need to improve streets, we need to have more police officers and whatever, when we know we would probably not win. Because as our lawyer has repeatedly told us for a week, what the law is, what the constitutional consequences are, and what the decisions that have been made. So I am very defensive of this council. We may not always all agree, and we usually don't. But I really resent it when it gets personal and I get accused of either creating a scam on water rates or trying to rig this, because that is not true. And I have always had great faith in God and been very involved in my church, whether it was raising my kids, teaching Sunday school, raising my grandsons. It has always been part of my life, and I really, really think you need to be careful what you're saying, because you're doing not only personal damage, but I think it's very poor to show this community that we don't respect each other and that we're not working in tandem for the best. We may not agree, but I think we all have the desire to do what's best for this community, and that's not demonstrating it. I would like to call for the question very quickly.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I have not had an opportunity to speak, so I'll speak, and hopefully we can go to the roll call vote. This conversation, though incredibly important and passionate, has not made our community safer. It has not grown our economy. It has not made our schools stronger. It's not made our water cleaner. The invocation prior to formal council meetings has become a controversial issue as of late. And while some wish to separate church and state, others wish to ban a certain viewpoint that, for the record, I too find repulsive. I will support the motion to begin each formal city council meeting with a moment of silent prayer and reflection. This protects the constitutional rights of all and allows people to individually pray to whomever they choose and reflect freely, peacefully, and without fear. As a man of faith, I personally will choose to pray. And I hope we can end this polarizing debate that is designed to divide us and not bring us together, and refocus our efforts on the challenges and opportunities that our city faces. Roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Gates.
No.
Nowakowski.
No.
Pastor. Waring. Williams.
Yes.
Valenzuela.
Yes.
Mayor Stanton.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-4. Now, we do have one more item on the agenda. I realize many people are here for this last vote, so we'll just,
I'm submitting the letter right now for you folks to know for the election. You're welcome.
the last item on the agenda is item 68.
Michael Johnson in the house.
All right, we're going to respectfully wait. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. We'll ask, if you're not here for the final item, if you can please see your way out of the council chambers so that we can finish the work of the city. Last item on the agenda. I want to respectfully ask everyone, if you're not here for this final item and if you wish not to sit and observe, if you can please see your way out of the council chambers so that we can get to this final item. If we can keep a quorum, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, sir. Okay. All right. I'm going to ask for a staff report. We are on item 68, 41st Street and Greenway Road. We'll begin with the staff report. Mr. Stevenson.
Vice Mayor, members of council, this request is a rezoning request to adopt G Ordinance G6129, a request to rezone 2.79 acres from R114 to PUD located at the northeast corner of 41st and Greenway here, shown in the crosshatch on the map. You see the aerial for the site right here. This request proposes a planned unit development to allow for an assisted living facility. The Paradise Valley Village Planning Committee voted to approve this request 12-0. The Planning Commission recommended approval as recommended by the Village Planning Committee by a 7-0 vote. There was a memo that came out just earlier this afternoon that you all have copies of, and that were at the back of the room, that outlined some additional stipulations for this request to address some of the neighborhood concerns that have been brought to staff over the last couple of weeks. Staff does recommend approval per that memo, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. I do have to open public hearing. We have several cards.
Vice Mayor, perhaps, it's in my district, perhaps the applicant can make a brief presentation. You did open the public hearing, right?
I did.
You're good? Okay. The applicant can make a brief presentation, then we can hear from the neighbors. They've obviously waited patiently. I didn't know that was going to be, how many hours did we spend on that? It's a rhetorical question, don't worry about it. It was a lot, and for that I apologize, but let's get them up here as quickly as possible, and then they have the time that they need to make their case, and then we'll go back and forth with that, if that's okay with you. Okay.
For the record, my name is Larry Lazarus. My office is at 420 West Roosevelt, Phoenix, Arizona. Will the people in support have an opportunity to speak as well? If not, I would forego my presentation and only come up on rebuttal. If I have an opportunity to lay out my presentation briefly, I will do so.
Can I ask, so for the folks who are here from the neighborhood against it, do you want to get up and speak first, and then we can have a back and forth, or would you rather have him speak and you respond to that? Okay, fair enough. Go ahead, Larry.
All right, very briefly. Our application is to rezone this property. Was submitted 6 months ago. Since that time, we've had significant outreach. Michael Johnson, representing the group that helped us with this outreach, is behind me. We've had that significant outreach as resulted in many adjustments that you have seen in your packet, and I'm not going to go over them in detail, that find themselves now in its stipulations. This transforms a vacant lot and a partially dilapidated house into what will become an assisted living community. There are 80 beds, 20 of which will be memory care residents. There will be a chapel, theater, barber shop, beauty shop, courtyards, activities, and exercise rooms. There's a need for this, and we've done a study to determine there's a need for this in the community. Within the 7.5-mile radius, there's a need for 549 beds for assisted living. We've reached out to the property owners, over 140 identified on that map in front of you. Some are neutral, some don't care, some didn't want to talk. There were 76 that did not oppose this, 51, in fact, 20 of which are outside of a half-mile radius, did oppose it. We have unanimous recommendation from Village Planning Committee. We have a unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission. There has been no vote against this for a recommendation to you. No one is making a recommendation against this case, up to you. Staff recommends approval. They feel we are compatible with this existing area and that we have met the land use pattern appropriately in the area. We meet the general plan goals. It's a 2-acre site. There's a mixed, and I'm not going to go over all of the different developments in this area, but there are churches, there's shopping centers, all along Greenway. There is single-family residential behind us as well. The opportunity to try and take advantage of or at least have frontage on Greenway and protect ourselves from the frontage on Greenway and still protect the neighborhood is always a challenge. We have a traffic report that shows that a very minimal amount of traffic will occur on this site. only six ins, you got me doing it, I'm tired now. We have 6 trips, AM, PM, AM trips during peak hours, and we have 12 during PM peak hours. That's a very small amount of traffic. Albeit that small amount of traffic, we have worked with the staff to make sure that we have full access on Greenway, and it will require us to take a median back in order to have left and right-hand turns out, so that there will be no access into the neighborhood, nor U-turns. We have provided the neighbors the amount of people that will be there. There will be 8 on the night shift and 12 on the day shift. There is sufficient parking for that number of people as well as visitors. In fact, we are meeting and exceeding the city parking requirements. You'll see some pictures that we took of other assisted living facilities showing that there is sufficient parking. You'll see some pictures from the opposition, probably, showing a full parking lot. Rather than having the duel of pictures of how much parking, I would just tell you that we meet and exceed the city's parking requirements. The lot is sufficient for the size of the project. We have huge setbacks. Front, 84 feet, rear, 25 feet. East, we have 40 feet, and west, we have 85 feet. It's only 30%, 33.4% of the lot is covered. So it is not an oversized building for the area. The height has been an issue. We've taken the height down from 34 feet to 30 feet at the top of the top. And in fact, we are at 25 feet as you measure it from the city. It is 2 stories. The property behind us, the residents, can build 2 stories on their property as well. We have increased the landscaping pursuant to further discussions, and we've had several meetings with the neighbors, many of which have been requested by the councilman and by city staff to work out some of these details. We have, and again, I'm not going to go over all of these stipulations, only to tell you that we have spent hours working on these stipulations to make sure that the neighbors are protected to the greatest extent possible. I want to thank everybody, including the opposition, for the time that they've spent with us in trying to work through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lazarus. Okay, we can go with the cards here. First,
Vice Mayor, I think some people were donating time to others, so just so you know, and whatever order they prefer is fine with me.
Sounds good. All right. If you are donating your time, if you could just raise your hand, let me know, and we'll get through these cards. First speaker is F. Ornelas. Is this person here?
Maybe read the address.
Yeah, 15815 North 41st Street. All right. Next speaker, Michael Albers, followed by Linda Whitty. Can I have the first? Yeah, sure. What's your name, sir? David what? Sandoval. Okay, Mr. Sandoval, followed by Michael Albers and Linda Whitty.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council. I'm here today. I am one of the neighbors in the neighborhood behind this area. I've lived there for 4 years. I've lived in the area, the vicinity, for 15 years now. I'm going to keep my presentation short since I'm a little bit away from this facility, but I've seen the neighborhood grow in the time that I've been there. I've seen the impact that the businesses have had on the traffic. Theoretically, there's no reason for most of those businesses along 40th Street or Greenway Road to traverse through our community. In reality, they do. There are 2 large churches, there is a school, there are several businesses, including AAA and others, that have come into the community since I've been there, or in the years just prior to me. There's another school that opened just across the street from me, and I can tell you that all of the cars go down our roads. It is a quiet neighborhood. It was historically horse properties, large lots, no sidewalks, And some of the small arterial streets, including 41st Street, where this giant building's going to go, are very narrow. 2 cars can barely pass. If anyone parks on the side, one person has to stop to let traffic through. No matter what signage is put up at this location, you talk about 50 beds, 20 employees, and we're supposed to believe a traffic study that says you're going to have 6 cars in daytime hours, 12 during the entire off-peak hours. It's simply incredulous. These people have children, their mothers, their fathers, there's holidays that come around. Traffic will undoubtedly burden our streets. I got into this process a while ago and tried to work with the applicants on this. I invited them to my office. I'm an attorney. They came in, Mr. Lazarus came in, introduced himself to me, and promised that I would be kept in the loop for the neighborhood for everything that was done. I have not received a single communication since. Not a one.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval.
I ask that the petition be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Albers, followed by Linda Whitty. Albers?
Yes. My wife and I live at 15802 North 40th Place. We also own the house right across the street from, if you look at that middle picture up there, if we looked out our front door, that's what we'd be looking at. It covers the entire length of our property. I know all of you probably have investment properties such like my wife and I do, and this is our investment, this is our future. And this is something that I have to deal with if I want to sell my property down the road or if I need to get another tenant in there. It's parking issue. David mentioned a little while ago. I don't think they have sufficient parking there to support that facility. And I'm going to see people parking along the side of the street there, which is going to cause havoc for my tenants to get in and out, as well as for our neighborhood, because majority of the people in our neighborhood use that entrance as a way of getting in and out. And as far as Mr. Lazarus was saying earlier about the Paradise Valley Village Committee approving this, they're sort of like what your faces are right now. We were always the last one on the agenda, and by the time we got there, they were more concerned about the 2 minutes and not listening to the concerns of the people in their village. As far as I'm concerned, the people on that committee are worthless. They don't serve our community because they have been nothing but letting things like this come into our neighborhood. We've got 3 churches, a school, another school coming in, another church that's trying to come in, and I tell you, it's wreaking havoc on this neighborhood. And we plead with you, put yourself in our shoes. If that was your house, would you want that?
Thank you, sir. Linda Whitty.
I do feel like I should respond to the worthless comment about the village people. They're not all my employee appointments. That's not how it works. But they are volunteers, so they give their time to the communities. If you're interested in being on a village, we can appoint you, and I actually would do that. So, but okay, well, we'll keep in touch, and I'll find out if I have an opening. It's by geography or by where you work, either one. So we will do that. We'll talk to you, probably not after tonight, but later. So I just wanted to address that. I'm sure that's, heat of the moment and so forth. They're good folks who are volunteering and trying. We've all appointed people to villages. So.
Agreed, thank you. Linda Whitty, followed by Ryan Freeman, speaking for Richard Schwager.
Linda Whitty, I'm here to discuss the proposed site that is being presented as a PUD. As a plan unit development, plan unit developments were initially presented to be for specialized uses. There are uses and zoning cases that are meant and criteria that needs to be met for assisted living centers. Unfortunately, we shouldn't even be here tonight due to the fact that numerous previous requests have been made for the RO zoning request at this site, and they were denied by the city due to the intrusion that non-single family residential development would affect and have those effects on the negative adjacent neighborhood. Those requests were not as intense as this and were not a 24/7 operation such as this. We are not against senior living. However, this use does not conform to the general plan. These properties still have a useful purpose in our residential single family lots that we have tried to preserve and maintain, which is the goal of the Neighborhood Association as our mission statement. The density and capacity of the lot is extensive for 80 occupants, and currently the city feels that we should be provided, the villages of the city need to meet the needs of all households, and those include us with large lots, equestrian animals, and llamas and horses, and the safety and security, and not to impair the quality of life that we exist today. There already exists an RO property to the west of the site, and the staff reports previously stated that those would be the bookend buffers of the neighborhood and would prevent any additional development along the Greenway corridor, which is primarily residential, except maintaining the main artery corridors for that commercial development. This proposed 60,000 square foot senior center, imagine if you will, an average Walgreens is 15,000 square feet and sits on 2 acres. This is 60,000 square feet, 2 stories, and the proposed square footage is larger than the entire commercial shopping center on the northeast corner of 40th Street and Greenway, and would sit on a 2-acre smaller site. The monstrosity of this 2-acre site is not consistent with the scale nor the character of the surrounding area. No other 2-story commercial
Mrs.
buildings exist. I believe I have.
Yeah, I thought you had extra time.
I have.
Great, oh, thank you. Thank you.
Who donated their time to Mrs. Whitty?
I need the names. Okay. 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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitty. Sorry for the interruption.
That's fine. The size of this proposed development at 60,000 square feet is much larger scale than the average 2,500 square foot residences in the neighborhood. This lot is clearly not conducive to their needs. I have personally visited other assisted centers, and those executive directors have stated that the employee-to-bed ratio is greater than 1 to 1. Specifically, the examples of the ones in the presentation that Mr. Lazarus has given. Where are they going to park when they have 42 spaces, 80 beds, and 20 employees? Not counting their rehab facility centers, the beauty salon, the visitors, the labs that are needed, and any additional services that would be required. This neighborhood is unique and provides us peace and tranquil rural living in the city. It would ruin and eliminate 2 of our single-family acres, which provide us with a diverse choice of housing that should be provided in all villages of the city to meet the needs of households. The proposed site would demolish and diminish the amount of the available acre properties by eliminating these 2 homes. One is currently vacant. The other one has a single mother with an epileptic daughter that has resided there for over 4 years, so it is not a home in shambles. It consists of proven viable residential home subdivision potential, as there have been 5 homes that were presented and pre-approved prior to the market crash in 2007. The property will still emit odor, noise, trash, and a nuisance to the surrounding single-family neighbors. We have tried to work with the applicant and Mr. Lazarus in trying to work on reducing the size of the building to one single-story or putting it partially in the ground to not impose into the neighborhood. They are not open to those whatsoever. Previously, we have presented information that the 40th Street and 40th Street and Paradise Lane had put a request in for a church to have a ingress and egress onto Paradise Lane. Quote, the city stated that they would deny that request due to the fact that it would generate traffic and add noise and glare into the adjacent property from the comings and goings of the congregation's automobiles, and the development would have a negative effect and downward pressure on all our adjacent properties within our community that has already felt pressure due to the additional commercialization over the years. I don't think anybody realizes the magnitude of this building. It's 190 feet on the back wall, facing directly into the neighborhood. 4 major principles that were presented that the city was asked to look at through Village Committee was 1, to present residential areas from concentrations and land uses that could change their character and destabilize land values. Well, in this case, your approval would not be protecting us. Other assisted living centers have numerous rentals adjacent to their sites and now have diminished land values. Number 2, you're to celebrate our diverse communities and neighborhoods' core value and the certainty and the character and the land use principles, which means new development needs to be compatible with existing uses and consistent with adopted plans. Therefore, the current zoning of the single-family residential should prevail. Celebrate diverse communities is also an option, and neighborhoods' core certainty and character, design principles to protect and enhance the character of the neighborhood. I don't know how a 60,000 square foot is to scale when it is actually larger than the United States White House. Two of our neighbors were handed stipulations prior to the presentations before us tonight while we were sitting here waiting patiently. I have asked for a 30-day continuance so we can further work with the applicant in regards to getting answers in regards to the traffic, streets and transportation departments, hours of delivery, operations, and stipulations that are not added currently and do not exist to protect the impact that this would have on the neighborhood. They do not have those answers for us, and they're not included in the stipulations that are given to me. I had personally walked to the council offices to give you a copy of the 60-plus signatures that we received in one evening in our neighborhood when they realized we were coming down here. We have over 90% of our neighborhood that lives immediately within the Walton Estates Neighborhood Association. I have given you packets. Hopefully you've had them and have had an opportunity to look at them. These are highlighted that were given within 2 hours. People gave us letters of opposition stating they don't support it as proposed. Single-family residence is still viable. A single story that is along the same characteristics of that is ideal. When looking at the pictures, yes, we could play a name game of who's got the best picture, but I've got reality. There are more than 100 U-turns on Greenway and 41st Street per hour, folks. We live there. It's reality. It needs to be administered that someone can take the time to realize the common sense and the imposition that this type of facility at the size that it currently is proposed would impact the neighborhood. The balloon heights that I presented to you in the packets show the entire height structure of this and what this would be adding to the demise of the views, the mountain views, as well as the monstrosity and the size and the nature of this building. You have official vehicles parking on 41st Street today. If that happens today because they go to lunch at the Barrows on 40th Street and Greenway, they are city and transportation water services trucks. They are personal vehicles, folks. There is an existing problem. This is only going to compound that. I didn't make them up. The pictures are what they are and are the testimony to noon Saturday. People don't visit assisted living. Well, when my visits to people, they said, guess what? We have to ask our employees to park on the streets because if not, there would not be sufficient parking due to the current standards. So you can complete Kimley Horn's traffic standards out the door. Reality is not always what the statistics show. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Freeman, followed by Cindy Freeman.
We're going to do all the ones against.
Oh, however you prefer.
Yeah, so it's this group over here.
Mr. Freeman, I apologize. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I want to give you the discretion, Councilman. No, it's fine. No, they are, but okay. I usually. Deborah Brewer, followed by Scott Whitty, and Jocelyn Albers. Yes.
Hi, I'm Deborah Brewer. We really respect what the Freemans are doing. It just doesn't fit in our neighborhood. The size and magnitude of the building will look like a castle with all the little houses all around it. We have asked on numerous occasions for them to maybe lower the ceilings. They could do 8-foot ceilings in there, sink it in the ground. We're not opposed to what they want to do. We're opposed to the size of it. Parking is going to be a big issue. If you have 80 residents and you have 12 people working on a daily... Did it go out? Hello? Oh. Working in there, they're going to be serving 240 meals a day. Well, you have to have cooks, kitchen help. I asked if these residents, since it is assisted living, can they have outside people come in to help them to clean their homes? And I was told no. However, any age can live in there from what I understand. If somebody wanted a car, they could have a car. So once you add your cooking help, they said they have one person to clean. That's 80 units. There has to be more than 12 people. What about the doctors? What about the maintenance people? I don't think we're getting a clear picture on the parking. This is definitely going to come into our neighborhood. On top of visitors coming through there. So in the city planning hand guide, it says that, and it's in the packet that we gave to you, it says that, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brewer.
It's on the third page highlighted in red.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brewer. Scott Whitty, followed by Jocelyn Albers.
Scott Whitty, I'm at 15601 North 40th Place. This goes back to the neighbors who are all concerned on the height of this building. From the mayor's desk to me, I'm 25 feet away. Figure 30 feet from there beyond this ceiling in your backyard. For 190 feet, that's a long ways to go. And from most of the neighborhoods in the area, I'd say probably 8, 10 houses, they can see it. We're on 1 acre property, so we're not right on top of it. We're away from it. We'll all be seeing it. And then we've gone back to other facilities bigger than this in beds. They are on 3+ acres. They have twice the parking they're suggesting having. For some reason, why? Why do all the newer ones have twice the parking as this one with more beds or the same? That's the biggest question. And then the others is the height of this building is just phenomenal, and the streets. Our streets are 20 foot wide. For city code, they are not allowed to even park on our streets throughout the whole neighborhood. And we don't want the street change coming into our neighborhood. Why do we want to introduce more traffic? There's a lot of people that don't even know our street exists at 41st. Ask people, have you ever driven by there? Yeah, there's a street, turn there. Well, we don't know there's a street there. That's because they're small, they're narrow. They were built that way from this development of this center, the subdivision we're in the 50s. And they've been that way. They weren't paved until the 80s, and there's no curbs, they're flat, there's no sidewalks, and you know, we don't need to change the streets or whatever they're trying to do to it. And what else do I got? Oh, the square footage. Okay, R114, we can only cover 25% of the lot. That's what the housing is in there. And they're going to be at 33%. That's almost 10% larger than what you could build a residential size house on there. Their height is 30 if it's...
You should finish his thought.
Sure, please.
Finish your thought, unless you... Yeah, I mean, you had, it sounds like...
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just
I
that...
appreciate you guys stopping on a dime like that, but we kind of traditionally...
Well, we've been asked. I mean, the square footage is, it's monstrous. I mean, it's you know, it's what it is. I mean, it's beyond the size. The envelope's too small for the letter. And that's what the problem is with it.
We do appreciate you were the first group that's ever actually like stopped when the thing actually beeped, so thank you for that. It's,
Okay.
This one. Hi, my name is Jocelyn Albers, and like my husband said, we live right to the west of this proposed project. And I would just like to state that our, as has been stated previously, is that our neighborhood is already suffering from the effects of all the congestion from the businesses that are nearby, churches, schools, and how much more can our neighborhood take? They want to put more commercial buildings on this neighborhood, and reality is a lot of people that frequent this properties drive through our neighborhood, and we're the ones that are impacted. Not sure where they got their numbers of the people that are for this project, but I can 100% guarantee that the people directly behind this project are 100% opposed to this project. And they may not be here today because they do work, and they cannot take time off work to be here and speak. I would just like to beg you guys to consider what the neighborhood is telling you and reject this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I,
Yes,
can
of course.
can we have Alan respond to the parking issue, whether it fits on Greenway or that neighborhood? Address some of those concerns. The city's view on views, maybe
Sure.
those three things.
Certainly, Mayor, members of council. This particular request sits on Greenway Road, and there's about 34,000 plus trips per day on Greenway Road. And so it is a parcel that has over the years been vacant and/or run down because it's a large lot, two large lots that front on those major streets. We don't typically see people want to build residential, particularly not single family at all, when you have that type of condition. So the proposed use as it sits with a building height of 25 feet, being an assisted living facility there, that fits in context with providing a buffer between that kind of intense traffic that comes back and forth and the existing single-family neighborhood to the north. There are other buildings that have height in the area as well. There's a church that has a height of 29 feet 6 inches. There's another church that's about 30 feet. There's some two-story apartments that are up on Bell Road. Down on Greenway and 40th Street, there's also some two-story apartments that are about 30 feet as well. So contextually, it does fit in surroundings. In this case, the parking, as stipulated with the memo, they are adding additional parking spaces, so they will have 42 parking spaces, which exceeds the city's parking requirements for this type of use.
Thank you. I would like the applicant to respond to the comments about the staffing and how that's adequate staffing and so forth. I don't know if that's Mr. Lazarus or the applicant himself.
Yes, we actually have an individual who is in charge of staffing and is expert in staffing, and if you state your name and address for the council.
Name is Sean Hearn, Executive Director for Via Ocotillo Assisted Living in Scottsdale. If I heard correctly, I think she said their ratio is 1-to-1 per resident. If that is what was said, that is not the case. The Arizona regulations does not state any type of ratio. We have to make sure we can meet the residents' scheduled and unscheduled needs.
If you can put up the slide on the staffing.
I think their underlying question is they don't believe that few staffers can deal with that many patients.
I think
so. I'm not in
Okay.
this business, so I can't interpret.
Okay.
Thank you.
So for an example, I have a building that can hold 120 right now. I have 90 residents. I do 12 residents during the day and actually do 4 for a third shift. I have 3 wellness centers, nurses stations. I have 3 med techs, and I have maybe 4 incidents a month that are not life-threatening. So I want you to make sure you really understand what assisted living is. It's not a nursing facility. It's not skilled nursing. It's where your loved one can have the assistance and the needs when they are ready for it.
Can I ask?
What you have before you is a list of the staffing, the on-site staffing in shift number 1 and shift number 2.
And that's what I was looking for.
Yes,
Thank you.
and
In
the-
addition to the explanation.
The doctors are not on staff. The doctors are not there. The kitchen staff will come during meals. The beautician and the barber and the exercise will come at periods of time, but they will not be there all the time. We do have specifically, and I hope you've had an opportunity.
I've seen this. That is accurate.
And that is the staffing requirement. When we said in our application it was going to be 20 people on the staff, we didn't divide it out in shifts. There's 8, I believe, in the day shift and either 12 or 13 in the evening shift. This is appropriate. This is the type of staffing that's necessary for assisted living. They're not going to be serving 240 meals during the day. They will be able to actually have their own meals in their own rooms. They are assisted living, but they are not. It is not nursing. They do not need full-time nurses, and that is an appropriate staffing diagram, or the slide you see before you is appropriate staffing for this area, for this unit.
So how many
for this
residents again?
development.
I know you
Sorry.
told me, but I've forgotten the exact number. How many residents, not people who work there, how many people actually live there?
There's 80 beds. 20 of them are memory care that are either Alzheimer's or dementia care.
So I assume most of your patients, if not all, are probably not driving themselves?
No, there's very few that drive at all, if at all, and it's a shame, but there aren't many visitors to these as well.
But so the residents won't have cars?
No.
In most cases?
Well,
It'll
they're
be
not
very rare.
prohibited from
I'm not
having
saying,
cars.
I'm not saying in all cases, but they're not going to be 80 cars because there's 80 beds. That's
No,
not.
they will not be driving to and from.
I've had occasion to visit several of these types of facilities in years gone by, including last year. Okay, thank you. There was a lot of meetings and discussion. They sent me a list today. Discussions began back in September. I will, as I told you in our meetings, I don't think the applicant got off to the best start with the neighborhood. And I'm sort of disappointed at how things got started. My name was invoked somehow when I didn't even know this was going on. So that is an unacceptable situation for me. However, I'm looking at Greenway Road with you said 34,000 trips a day. Alan, can you talk to that point about what's been talked about, that specifically at our meeting last night, but just in general about the signage issues? Because I think some of this, it sounds like there's already a problem that had not been addressed to my office in the past. So we were going forward to try to address that, regardless of this. So can you explain a little bit?
So, mayors, members of council, this request, with the new stipulations from the memo that came out earlier, seeks to address some of the traffic issues in a couple of different ways. So one is it requires some additional signage indicating that that this is for local traffic only as you would turn onto 41st Street from Greenway Road. And so there's a stipulation requiring the developer to pay for that. It does have to be approved by the Street Transportation Department as to what it will say.
Neighbors need do nothing.
Right, the neighbors don't have to do anything. There's another stipulation that would seek to minimize the Half Street improvements for 41st Street so that it keeps its more rural nature, which was something that the residents asked for because they didn't want to have a wider street to
In this case, they're
encourage.
actually asking for nothing. We'd make the applicant make it a nicer street, but we're told you don't want that, so it's going to stay the way it is, which was a request I think Mr. Whitty made.
It won't stay exactly like it is because they'll have to do some improvements to it, but it's the minimum amount to make for safe travel. And so that's what streets will have to look at when they come in with the plans if it's approved. And then the other thing is there's a stipulation that's added that requires the developer to work with the residents on either no parking signs within their neighborhood along 41st Street, and then also Waltan Lane, which is the residential street to the north, or a resident parking permit program. They'd have to meet the Street Transportation Department's requirements to do all that, but it requires that the developer lead that effort to work with the neighbors to see if they can get some consensus. Ultimately, if the neighbors don't get consensus, it won't be forced upon them. They'll have to follow the rules
We're
to
not
do
going to
that.
make the neighbors have signs if they don't want them, but assuming they have consensus, they should get the signs, and will again have to pay nothing. It's nothing that they're going to have to do.
Correct.
Other than talk to their neighbors as they've done before to make sure everybody's on board.
Correct, Councilman Waring.
Thank you. We have a commitment from the applicant to continue working on these issues after the fact, right? If something's not working out specifically, they're going to go back and address it further. I don't think people are going to park up in that neighborhood to walk back to that facility. I just don't think that's going to happen. But given frankly the age and infirmities of the residents, they're definitely not going to be doing that, and it doesn't sound like in most every case. But going forward, could you explain kind of what we're doing here in terms of stipulations, their legal validity, for lack of a better word, how the residents would address any grievances they might have if they feel like the applicant is violating what we set forth here?
So, Vice Mayor, Councilman Waring, the stipulations are attached to planned unit development, which is a little booklet that outlines all of their regulations for this parcel as it relates to the zoning issues. And so the memo outlines some stipulations that cover issues that aren't in the PUD, also like the street requirements, because those aren't part of the PUD. It also adds language to the PUD to address the concerns that residents have had. For example, there is a stipulation that has hours for the deliveries, and so I think that's 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is what it says in the memo. And so if they weren't abiding by that, for example, they would have to call the Neighborhood Services Department, and they could do enforcement based upon that language in the PUD and them not complying with it. And then we would make them to comply with that. If we ultimately had to go to court, we could do that. We always try and get resolution, as the council knows, sooner rather than later on those issues.
And a concern was access to the facility off 41st Street. The only access is going to be a gate for a person, not a vehicle.
Correct, Vice Mayor, Councilman Waring. The stipulations require no vehicle access to 41st, only pedestrian access through a gate. All the vehicle access comes from Greenway Road.
The deliveries are all made on the Greenway side. That was a change that was made.
That's correct, and the deliveries are up front too as well, not in the back of the building.
Do the neighbors need to do anything regarding landscaping or anything else? The things that they have requested, there were quite a few, I think, stipulations about trees and the type of trees and so forth. The trees are designed, or they're the types of trees that don't have leaves. That was a question that came up, I think the Albers asked me that today, about leaves blowing into their yards and so forth. That should not happen. The trees will be big enough to block the facility, but they will not be shedding leaves into other people's yards and so forth.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, they are going to be deciduous trees that are grown and cultivated to make a hedge so that they try and block some of that 25 feet view. I couldn't stand before you and say that no leaves are going to fall on any neighbor's yards in wind, but the tree type that we're selecting and directing them to do seeks to minimize those impacts.
Okay, I don't know. Tried to address everything except the views. You spoke about the city just has never set the precedent that you are entitled to your view. I fully recognize that some of the views are going to be impacted. There's no doubt about it. Just as when their houses were built, they probably blocked somebody else's view. Same with mine. My question, is there any precedent for views being a determining factor in this council turning down an applicant?
Mayor, members of council, lots of times people bring up views as an issue to try and deny a zoning case, but a property owner has a bundle of rights that reside within their property. They don't have a right to a view across someone else's property. And so the council couldn't use that as the sole reason to deny a request because someone didn't have a view they had historically across someone else's property.
We've heard from the neighbors. We've heard some from the applicant. Do my colleagues need to hear more from the applicant? Have questions been answered? Do my colleagues have questions for the neighbors or the applicant? Either one. I'm not right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to presume, but looks like nobody. Okay. I just wondered if anybody had any questions.
Yeah, no, we still have a few more cards, but several cards, actually.
I have one question.
The
Okay,
rest of the cards
Councilman
are,
Pastor has a question.
rest of the cards were in favor?
Yeah, the rest of the cards are in favor.
All right. There was going to be testimony. Are you all right in foregoing the testimony at this late hour? They'd be willing to forego the testimony that was going to be given, and it will answer any questions that you might have.
If Councilman Waring, I'll defer to you, if you're okay with that.
I guess, we
It's
try
up
to
to
make
you.
sure there's going to be a content-heavy presentation here. Obviously, I know you guys have stayed here for a 6-hour meeting, so I apologize again for that. Everybody missed dinner. I just want to make sure if there are questions, if people feel uncertain about what they heard, and Councilwoman Pastor had a question, I thought, so, you.
I was just questioning the housekeeping laundry piece because there's a number of people living in the area, and so I was curious as to only one housekeeping. It was just, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, Cindy?
So I'm assuming in the assisted living world, there's more than just one housekeeper, but I'm assuming then the caregiver, something happens or spills or
There's-
something, they clean up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of double duties
Okay,
there
yeah,
as well.
There is. In assisted
multitasking.
living, you have a lot of universal positions. And so for third shift, most of your residents are sleeping. So that's where your caregivers would clean like an unoccupied room or do laundry. Does that help? Or does that answer your question?
It does, but
Okay.
it's just,
I know it looks small, but when you have, most of your assisted living residents can clean
Are
their own
clean,
apartment.
yeah,
They're
okay, that's
very
what I'm
particular who
thinking
they let
more.
in and out. So you
Right.
just want to go in and make sure
you just
that
want
it's
to
staying
help
clean.
and tidy up.
Yeah.
Got it.
I actually have a couple questions for Alan about, so both the parking, we talked about it earlier, but the parking and the traffic studies were questioned for their, I guess, veracity. So my question to you is, how do we come to get traffic studies? The city does this all the time. Obviously, we've got a whole department that specializes in traffic, and also the parking. Can you just talk about how the city came up with the standards, how accurate they are, how often they're off and it causes problems and we have to go back and fix something? Is that likely in this case? I mean, you do these cases all day, every day, so.
Sure, Mayor, Councilman Waring. The parking standards are in the zoning ordinance, and they are based upon ITE, what's Institute of Traffic Engineers standards, that are across the country, where they do surveys related to how much parking is needed based upon uses and the square footage of those uses. And so we adopt those standards largely, and that's in the zoning ordinance, and that's what their requirements are. For example, a number of assisted living facilities in the city of Phoenix take advantage of a use permit provision that allows them to reduce their required parking because of the population they serve doesn't drive. So they can come in and say, we don't want to meet the ordinance standard, we want to do something less. In this case, that's not what they're doing. They're meeting the ordinance standard, which is to provide additional parking. So based upon that, I don't believe there's going to be a parking issue in the neighborhood in the future with this application.
Obviously, we've done, not we, but you really, been in the department, 15 years or something. So you've seen a lot of these cases, and it hasn't been an issue going forward?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions, I think I'm ready to make a motion.
All right, let me Thank you, Councilman. I will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I will entertain that motion.
Okay. I understand the neighbors will be unhappy about this. I'm going to make a motion to approve with all the stipulations that were discussed at last night's meeting and try to work out today and so forth. I know there's been a lot of, there's been some discussion. There hasn't been a lot of input on this, but I've got the list of how many contacts there have been with the neighborhood. I asked you to pull that together today, Alan, and it's quite a lengthy list over a long period of time. We can't make these decisions based on views, or there would pretty much never be any development anywhere in the city. At least one of you is a contractor, one of you is a realtor. If there are no houses to sell being built, then you're out of a job. The contractor, if there's nothing that can be built, then you're out of the job. And that has a ripple effect on the rest of us. We felt that ripple effect across the city and across the country in 2008, 9, 10, and 11. That was pretty grim. So that's not really a way we can do business. I can't ask my colleagues to legislate effectively on that. I do think the applicant, after a very shaky start, which displeased me greatly, has put together a pretty good package, and it is Greenway with the 34,000 trips and so forth, and we're adding 50 trips a day or something. I mean, it's a statistically negligible amount. So they're going to try to address, you're going to try to address, the traffic people are going to try to address some of the traffic issues in that area, irrespective of this, which we don't believe is really going to add to it. Your traffic experts do not believe is going to add to it. As I look at that section of Greenway, keeping in mind I lived on the other corner for a year a long time ago, but it was busy then. Before most of you moved in, that shopping center was there. It's, I think, Starbucks, shopping center wrapping around, a smaller office complex that's used by an attorney, I believe, this empty lot, a house, and then the water department has a facility there, and then a church, if memory serves. So on both sides, for a pretty big stretch, it's not houses. There's one house. There's the house that is presumably, I guess, being bought for this project that will be demolished. What was the second house? I do remember there was a second house. Could you address the house issue, Alan?
Mayor, Councilman Waring, the house, you'll recall from the meeting last night, had an aerial, had a bunch of, I don't know if they were old cars or old
Yeah, I mentioned
junk
that
sitting
house.
in the back, and I think
And there's
that's
another
the
house
other.
that's on this property, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So those are the two houses. There's not a third house, right? There's two houses there now. There'll be one after this project, and really a pretty considerable stretch. I don't know if that's a quarter of a mile or whatever, but there's big buildings there already. As I drive up and down Greenway, if we're not going to build a facility like this, and by we, I guess I mean the applicant, but if the city is not going to allow people to build buildings and lots like this, where are they going to build them? Where else would they go? I guess I'm not sure, because Greenway is, I'm sure it's not our busiest street. It's probably not as busy as Bell. But how busy is it, Alan, compared to other streets in the city? I mean, it's pretty wide and pretty big.
It is a pretty busy street. I don't have the exact numbers in comparison, but you're right, it doesn't carry as much traffic as Bell or Thunderbird because it doesn't have as much east-west connectivity, but still has significant traffic
I'm actually
volumes.
surprised Thunderbird has more. I would actually think, I usually choose to take Thunderbird because it doesn't seem to have as much as Greenway, but regardless, it's a big
I
street.
apologize, I should clarify, Thunderbird cactus as it comes across.
Thank you. All right, for those reasons, I'm going to make this motion. Motion to approve the request to rezone the northeast corner of 41st Street and Greenway Road from R1-14 to PUD to allow a mix of uses, including an assisted living facility, per the memo dated February 3rd, 2016, and adoption of the related ordinance. And I can't believe I did that without my glasses, but I think I did it, so thank you. No, I've got them here. I just
Okay, we
forgot
do
to
have
put
a
them up.
motion. Do we have a second? I'll second the motion. Any further comments or questions by my colleagues? Hearing none, roll call.
DeCiccio. Gallego.
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Noakowski. Pastor.
Yes.
Waring.
Yes.
Williams. Valenzuela.
Yes.
About the mayor.
Yes. Did you get my vote?
Mayor Stanton.
Yes.
Eminently forgettable, apparently.
Thank you.
Chris, it's terrible. You got the mayor.
Okay, that is the final item on this agenda. All right. We move on to citizen comment. Citizen comment will begin with Joanne Scott Woods. Followed by Blue Crowley.
Oh, good.
Ms. Woods?
Okay. My name is Joanne Scott Woods. I am a co-coordinator for the People Demanding Action Community Coalition, co-coordinator for Arizona Communities for Change, which is a merging of Somos America and People Demanding Action, and the family representative of fallen citizen Remain Brisbane. This past Friday, January 29th, the United Nations Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent completed its assessment of the status of Black people living in the United States. In their report, they spoke the names of unarmed Black people who have died, quote, at the hands of the police, unquote. They stated that contemporary police killings and the trauma it creates are reminiscent of the racial terror lynching of the past, and that the impunity for state violence that has resulted in the current human rights crisis must be addressed as a matter, quote, of urgency. I would like to suggest that our city speak the names of fallen citizens and address our current crisis of the disproportionate killing of Black and brown people as a matter of urgency also. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Mr. Blue Crowley?
Hi, guys. I got two for you today. The first is I got a letter from the Nimsy Nazis, dated the 27th, postmarked the 28th. I got it on the 30th. First day I could deal with the people was on the 1st. And the letter says that within 10 days of issuing this letter, we're going to be checking you out. So being that they had already taken 6 of the days, and they're saying that it'll be within 10, and 10 days would be a Saturday, I have a problem with this, and I'd like to get it resolved. My other problem is, Mr. Meyer, when Ed Zucker sent me up to see you after voting on the 25th of August, and I went to file a complaint of having a police officer accost me in my voting, being that Mr. Lane had called the police on me. I've asked today, being almost 6 months since the incident, and being that I had to refile because Mr. Myers, knowing what had happened, because when I walked in and Mr. Lane was behind the desk, the gentleman who had called the officers to come down to the voting, I go, well, what kind of skullduggery is happening here? And then when Nick of your office, Ed, saw me and I gave him the information and said, well, we're going to have to look at it more and get this done and resolved. When I saw Mr. Lane downstairs, he should have been fired a long time ago. As in, when I'm at the voting booth and in my voting precinct, that's sanctuary. You don't send an officer to mess with me for what? Because I had walked in and said, I'm not going to be voting provisionally. Here's the number for the county to make sure that this has no problems, and then asked what I needed to do. The woman said, stand here and wait. I stood there and waited, and what do I get? Officer Russo. Well, I turned around and said, are you here to vote? Because if you're not here to vote, you need to get out of here. And she said, her answer is, well, I was called down and told to do this by the 15th floor. I did no criminal activity. I was doing my constitutional right to impart my feelings to you through the ballot, and I didn't need to have anybody knowing what my vote was, so I was not going to vote provisionally. So, Ed, that was August 25th that the incident happened. I turned it in to you that day. 2 weeks later, when I find out that, well, it was you people that had called the police, where is the status of that
Thank you, Mr. Crawley.
and what are you going to do?
James Deibler is our last speaker. I don't see Mr. Deibler. This meeting is adjourned.